Well, welcome everybody. So we've got just in the chat section, if you're walking into the room, so to speak, want to invite you to reflect and then perhaps make a comment as to what might be 3 goals you wish to accomplish this coming year in your role in your school district. And then we'll come back to that full circle at the end, we hope. Give you a chance to reflect on that now. So you might tell us your name, what school you're from, and what 3 goals might be. If you want to just share 1 goal, that's okay too.
Hey, David, go ahead
Yes.
and put it up there where it says set sticky message, and that way it won't scroll at the top of the chat.
Do I need to, let's see. Oh, should I put it there?
I think if you put it there, I think if you put it there, it won't scroll away. Yeah. So everybody will see it at the very top.
Hey, Tim. Yeah. Welcome, Anthony. Yeah, just as you come into the room, think about 3 things that maybe you've been focusing on. In our school district, they want to focus on SMART goals. So if it's a SMART goal for you or just your own intelligent goal, I think we get a little overboard in some of our different assessment areas. But Mike's back from Las Vegas. Good to see him again. So we barely got finished with, but perhaps this is the best time when we look at what we were able to accomplish, what we weren't able to accomplish. What are 3 goals that we might have? If we just have 1 goal, feel free to share it with us in the chat room. Hey, Peter, good to see you. Chris, Mark, good to see you. And I might say that for this purpose, maybe these goals are maybe not as related to the COVID, how we come back to the beginning of the year, as much as your part of your bigger picture, if you've been in your role for at least a year or more, what some of your goals moving forward might be. Hey, Jason, good to see you. Soon to be Dorchester. That's interesting to discussion to have sometime. New Brunswick, Canada. Awesome. Wonderful. St. Andrews by the Sea. Beautiful. Love it. Just going to keep letting you while we're getting ready to start here in just a little bit. I want you to go ahead and start thinking about maybe what 3 goals you might be. If you have 1 goal you want to share. Hey, Andrew, good to see you. And Rick, I have 4 o'clock. Do we need to wait anything so we've got people opening, or should we just jump in, you think?
No, I think we're at 4:01 now. I think we go.
All right. Well, I'm glad everybody is joining us for the afternoon. The afternoon sessions, we've already absorbed a lot of information. And today I just want to share about a topic that has been a kind of a passionate thought about mine, and it's helped me kind of frame some different things. Over the years, I can say that one of the things that I have spent my summers doing is kind of in the self-help section of Barnes & Noble. And so I seem to be thinking about what's been the greatest challenges, what have been some of the struggles, and what can I learn from business and other areas. So I spend a lot of time in the summers trying to read different books, different topics, and different things that I might be able to use and transfer what's working out in business that might work within our world and our area. And so there were a couple of different things that for me have been useful in sparking thought. And so I wanted to just share them with you as it relates to how two national best-selling books that we might explore might help us think about how we go about advocacy and how it might be able to empower our vision, and just share a little bit of my journey, and then hopefully have some time to share some discussions about it as well. So as I share my screen with you, the topic here is contagious moments. And then, again, there's two books that you may or may not be familiar with, but this was not anything that I thought I'm going to talk about during the COVID, but this Contagious, Why Things Catch On, and maybe there'll be a parallel or not, but that wasn't my intent necessarily. But again, to share with how I've been thinking about some things and reframing some things over the last couple of years. So Contagious, Why Things Catch On in Society, in marketing and social media and that kinds of things. And then the other book is The Power of Moments, and why certain experiences have extraordinary impact. So I have a question for you. There's three brands in front of you there: Walt Disney, Cheerios, and Scrubbing Bubbles. So I'm going to send out a poll to you, and let's see what you believe. Which brand do you think has the most word of mouth success advertising? Which brand? Walt Disney, Cheerios, or Scrubbing Bubbles? Go ahead and vote, and let's see what you, as a collection of people this afternoon, might think. Don't overthink it. And do I need to hit publish again? Let's try that. There we go. Now you have access. Give you a little bit more time to click and vote in. Okay. So the results at the moment say that 60%, 62 of you believe that Walt Disney World, that's a great choice, has the biggest advertisement by word of mouth. 24% of you believe Scrubbing Bubbles, and 14% of you believe that it was Cheerios. So the winner is Cheerios. So if you guess Cheerios, you're the winner there. Now, why might that be? Well, Jonah Berger in his Contagious research talks about why things get triggered, why there's a lot of research behind it all. And while Disney, I think, would be a great, most of us would probably say that's really where we thought it would be. But the reality is, once you get back from Disney, you share it with tons of people. But about a week or two later, you get stuck in life and other things get shared and talked about. Whereas Cheerios is something that is part of everybody's daily life. And if you love Cheerios, or you want to get your health a little better and you're working on your cholesterol, you're trying to fake your kids into eating something a little bit more healthy, so you go the Honey Nut Cheerio route, that kind of thing. So there's some interesting science behind all of that, but I think most of us probably would have felt, as your poll discovered, that it was Disney World. So congratulations on Cheerios, folks. Let me have a question now for you, okay? If I show you two brands, I want you in your chat room to tell me three things that you can buy right now from Home Depot or Target. Your choice, Home Depot or Target. What are three things that you could buy from one of those stores right now today? Oh, I know you have answers faster than that. There's a little bit of lag time, I think. Home Depot or Target? What are 3 things you could buy? Anybody? Anybody? Paint, lumber, toothpaste. I hope that's at Target and not Home Depot. Great. Okay, so the delay of things coming in. So you get my idea, right? Now, I just want to share with you a little bit about what the marketing says. Okay, the guerrilla, sorry, I can't speak. Guerrilla marketing says this. This, as a band director and a music teacher, this really got my mind thinking very quickly. But here's what the basic marketing says. You know what Home Depot sells, you know what Target sells, but they spend millions of dollars every year marketing to you because the data says that it takes 9 times for you to see something before you act and make a purchase. 9 times. So why, as music teachers, do we think if we send it home in a flyer made on the copy machine, stuffed in a teenager's book bag, that we think we've been successful in communicating something? So if we get, that's right. So it's like 8 times, not as much, but on average, it takes 9 times for you to see something before you act on it. Now, here's what's scarier about that research. Think about it. Do you know people that if you want to get their attention, you have to send them a text? Email won't work. But you also have other people that email is the only way you know you're going to get their attention. And perhaps you know that if you're going to reach your principal or your area superintendent, if you're going to go get to them, you've got to go by their office. You've got to sneak your head in the door and look them eye to eye to get communication with them, right? We get that people communicate in different ways, right? So here's what the data says. For you, the way you receive information and your preference of choice to receive that information, for you to get it 9 times, we need to send it 27, 28 times in a diverse methodology of delivery before you get to the 9th time. Wow. Okay. That's a lot. But that's in general what it takes for us to purchase something from stores that we already know what they're going to sell and what they're going to have for us. Okay. Now, part of Berger's information tells us that in his data, they did a large study, but basically the McKinsey report says this: word of mouth generates 2 times more sales than paid advertising. Okay, so in this modern era of the social media, and social media is free, everything we start getting into things, we all believe that social media is the way to go. But when you think about it again, they're spending billions of dollars marketing, but even still, word of mouth, more so than the paid advertisement, is the strongest. More than 2 times greater results. Okay, so let's talk about word of mouth via social media. What would your guess be? The percentage of calls to action that are acted upon based on word of mouth that happens through social media. 70%, 50%, 30%? What would you guess? Well, the research that was done by Jonah Berger in Contagious says 7% is social media driven. Because the reality is more people spend more time in their day in face-to-face, on the phone, in different opportunities of face-to-face and people interaction. So what we need to know is, while it takes my takeaway about music advocacy is, if it takes major brands that people already know, and it takes 9 interactions before they're going to make a decision, and it takes 27, 28 different ways to make that happen, but yet word of mouth is even stronger still, how do we get people to understand where we're coming from, what our programs are about, how our teachers build their programs, how we as a district leader guide the advocacy and create a sense of understanding for what we do? And so this is where I feel like the research that Jonah Berger did, it becomes very interesting to us, because the research, yeah, definitely, we're home on social media more, but again, it's only 7% of the face-to-face that happens via social media, and so what Berger says is they researched 6,000 articles on the New York Times bestseller and really looked at everything and looked at how all the data worked and what didn't work, and did an analysis and came up with 6 things, 6 steps to build a recipe, if you will, of how we can become, or why things become viral or go and spread like wildfire. Social currency, triggers, emotion, things that are public, things that are practical, and the use of story. So I want to dig a little deeper into these 6, and again, thinking about how we deal with things on these 6 steps. So social currency, he says, we share things that make us look good. How can we, his example is if we're able to inform other people about trending new smartphones or different things, it makes us look good. It makes us look important. So he says one of the things that we need to talk about is, how do we make people feel like insiders? How do we get our teachers and their programs to share with their parents and get their parents in the community and making people feel like insiders? And it's about finding the inner remarkability of the programs. What's the most important thing about what we do, and how can we create social currency in our communities about the arts, whether it's an individual teacher, whether it's individual programs, or whether it's our arts community at large. Triggers. Anybody remember that really awful song, Friday, right? Okay, it's like one of the most worst songs in history, probably, but it also gets some of the most hits on YouTube every Friday because it's a trigger. They go back into, if you're old or in the community, you might remember that Coca-Cola put out this great advertisement about Diet Coke and having a Diet Coke break at 3:00, and had the big sexy workman out there and making sure everybody took a break. Well, Coke sales went up because there was a trigger of, oh, it's 3:00, I need to have a break, I need to have a Coke. Okay. And so Kit Kat did the same thing. Kit Kat sales were down. And so they did a merger advertisement of Kit Kat with coffee, because the reality is people drink coffee at different points of the day and every day. So if we can associate the trigger mentally of having a Kit Kat and having coffee, we're going to sell more Kit Kat. Okay. So how can we, in our programs, in our communities, or how can we as leaders in our district with school board and stakeholders, what are some ways that we can create some commonalities and some associations that create triggers to develop an arts advocacy? Emotion. He says, when we care, we share. Isn't that true? When we have a story to tell, we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute, but it's the emotional context. The reason you're an arts person is because of emotional attachment to music and the artistry and performing it. And so what he says about this is that the data supports that people who learn something during a physical activity were more likely to pass along the concept. That's what business does. Business does their face-to-face influence in activity. So whether you're sharing and talking with people at work, how can you be sharing and talking about work and building social currency about how important the arts are, or telling something really cool about what your kids are doing, or what in your district wise, what's really happening in the different schools within their learning community. That's really cool as you're sharing those things when you're on the golf course, when people are in the tennis courts, when they're in the grocery store, in the hair salon, soccer fields with their other kids. When we can create a sense of advocacy and start using the sense of emotion, speaks more than just the data. The data is important, but what we're learning through the data is that we've got through 30 years of data, but is the data effectively communicating and getting through to the stakeholders at the rate in which it used to? And what the information is sharing is not as much. Another part of his 6 steps for the recipe of effective communication and how things go viral is that people tend to follow others, but only when they see what those things are doing. Steve Jobs designed the Apple logo on the Mac so people could see it when they were coming by, not when it was closed on the Mac top, right? And to me, when I think about this is something that I don't think I did very well as I could as a band director. And our music teachers out there were so passionate about the music that we need to teach and the things that we need to accomplish within our pedagogy that for me, going and doing another public parade or going and doing a pep rally or going sing the drum line somewhere, those were not part of my major initiative. But if we're talking about in these moments of COVID, in these moments of budget cuts and different things, if we want to become more socially engaged and have more social currency in our communities, then we as arts folks within our district and whom we lead, we need to find more visible ways to get our arts organizations out in public and more visible in this context. So how we get back to the next P, okay, is going to be practical, right? Humans crave the opportunity to give advice and offer tips, especially if they can offer practical value, okay? Paying it forward to help others. No one will share a product or idea that doesn't have a practical value. You know, one of the things that I've seen that I love that, I don't know if you've been to any of Richard's sessions lately, but one of the things the Carmel bands did years ago is they started having a car wash, and it was a major fundraiser. They made tens of thousands of dollars at the car wash, selling 4,000 tickets to their car wash, and then they had an extra something on the back of it, so it made it a win-win. So if you didn't go to the car wash, you could go get the extra dessert for buy one get one free or something. But the key is that they had 400 people come for the car wash, and they made it such a huge experience for the community because it was practical and it was giving back and it was public. So I'm trying to think of those different kinds of things that I'm sure the last thing that the Carmel folks wanted to put on their calendar was another thing. While it was a great fundraiser, it was way more than a fundraiser when it comes about advocating and what great things are happening for kids and how we can be exploring and dealing with our programs. And so the final one is the one I really want us to think about in the context of all of this, and it's stories. And the example that Jonah Berger uses in Contagious is the subway story. We can talk about statistics like we want to talk about statistics in the arts, but they used to advertise that Subway has 5 sandwiches under 500 calories, but then they went to Jared, right? And Jared lost 100 pounds, whatever he lost, and they show these pictures of Jared holding out his waistband that came out way that he used to. Doesn't fit into those pants anymore. And so they call that a Trojan horse. While you show Jared and you see that success story, you're telling a story that people can relate to, but there's something inside that has even bigger. You're telling them through the story, and they call it a Trojan horse because there's more things to it than the obvious, is that you understand it's healthy. You understand that, hey, they must have a variety of good things on their menu at Subway because he was able to eat it every day for that many months and the different types of things. But what stories do we have in the arts to share our story with our stakeholders, with our board members, and creating that positive environment and getting that positive context that Bob Morrison was talking about with our school board members? How can we get our teachers, how we can get our parents within the organization to tell their stories about the difference that was made? I think about Kyle. Kyle was our hero. He was the motivation of the band. Kyle was disabled. One leg didn't touch, was shorter than the other and couldn't flex all the way to a flat. He could only put the tip of his toe down. So as a marcher, Kyle fell a lot of times, and on the blacktop, he got scuffed up, and he was tenacious, and he wasn't going to let anything stop him. But Kyle, through band, stayed engaged, and by October, you couldn't tell him any different from any other kid, but it became a community for Kyle, and Kyle, through his disabilities and challenges, went on, and he's very successful. He went straight into a career working for UPS, and is very beneficial and is contributing to society and has a great professional career through UPS that he attributes to his engagement in the arts and how it benefited him and gave him a family and supported him, and how he learned what he could accomplish if he put his tenacity and he had a support system. I think about another student who was living out of his Jeep. His parents lost their jobs and had to move out of town, and he was living with his big brother in a Jeep so he could stay in school and stay with his family in band. And that student is now graduating with a music education degree and is going to be teaching. What about the young man in one of our Title I communities? Didn't have a great structure, didn't have a great home life, but through the arts and through what he was able to gain, ended up with a full fellowship going to Juilliard. Okay, so the point here is, what the data tells us is that the stories combined with these different elements, if we think about the different triggers and the social currency, and whether it's practical, whether it's public, while these are things that are not necessarily educating the child, it's about how do we make our programs more effective and more visible and able to create some social currency in what we're doing. I want to share this with you. Let me ask you, of those steps, those recipes, okay, which step do you think could be something that you think about as it comes about mentoring with your teachers or your program in your arts and creating some goals that you could use in this coming year and focus on? Is it finding more things that are more public? Is it finding more practical things that hit your community? Is it twisting the statistics into stories that can be more emotionally engaging? What do you think? There's one area you could focus on and how to create that. Yeah, a lot of us are saying do more things that are public. And here's what the research says. Once we start with, and 55% of you are saying stories, and then the next one is social currency in public. So what we've learned through Berger's research and how we get something to become contagious and something that's so spreading like wildfire that people are going to support and get behind is when you start adding up the different steps. If you start with story, but you find a way to do more things publicly, and you start developing some social currency in your community, and the more of those 6 steps that you include and how you wrap them up together is where we become the strongest in our opportunity to impact our vision and our mission. So that's the first portion of the books. The next one I want to share with you, and then we'll wrap it up in the dovetail, is a great book called The Power of Moments. Okay, The Power of Moments. Do you remember your senior prom, anybody? How about that dress? Some of you are jealous, I can tell. Yeah, we have senior prom moments. They were really special moments. All right. What about this one? Let's see. Do you remember when your child left for college? Some of us aren't there yet. Some of you are. Okay. What about your first paycheck? That was a big deal. It wasn't very big back in that day, but that was a big deal, wasn't it? Okay. So we all have defining moments in our lives, that meaningful experiences that stand out in our memory. So my question for you is, do you have a defining moment? Do you have a professional memory that stands out to you either as a teacher or as an administrator? What might that be? What's a defining moment for you? I think it was a duct tape outfit, by the way. Okay. I'm not doing a very good job of keeping up with the chats there, so my apologies in that. But So what's the defining moment as it relates to what the Hill brothers have to talk about? So in our field, we're fortunate. We have defining moments built in. We have art gallery displays, we have concerts, we have football games, we have musicals and art shows. You know, we count on these moments every year as part of what we do in the arts, right? And some of them happen by luck. You know, a bus breaks down on the way to perform at a major event. For me, that was, we were on the way to the Midwest Clinic and the tire blew out and I was going to miss our rehearsal in the Hilton. And so we'd just been to Grand Nationals the month before. The kids were still in that mode. And I just said, well, let's break out into arts. And suddenly, oh my gosh, we were in a truck stop in the middle of nowhere on I-75 or I-65. And we were doing a warm up and they were playing the opener of the Jenkins American Overture from memory because we were in the parking lot wanting to make sure that we were okay. So yeah, so those moments, sometimes they happen because we planned them. Sometimes they happen just out of luck, right? But these are shared experiences that students will talk about forever. And so we have defining moments. And so one of the things that they share from the data is they think about Disneyland and they talk about the power of moments at Disneyland. So they did some research. And so when they went to Disneyland, they did a bunch of data. And so they talked with families. And what they did is they had people track every hour through the course of their experience at Disney. And of course, you know, it gets up, everybody's excited, they're in there, but they also, you know, they're documenting at 9 o'clock, they were in a line for an hour and a half before they went to a 2-minute ride. And they went through the different experiences in it. It was great, but then they sat down and they were exhausted at 1 o'clock and they were sitting on the park bench. And then they went to have dinner and they got a hamburger and a hot dog and 2 drinks for $82.95, right? And so they go through and they track the day, they get through the end of the day, and they go back and score and rank it all. And so on a scale 1 to 10, what a 10 was the most amazing experience, and then a 0 was it was awful horrific. And so when they calculate up and they did the data, the average of the bell curve, the average was a 6.9. Okay. But when they did research follow-up 2 months, I can't remember, I think it was 2 weeks later, when you ask people how was their experience, they rated it as a 9. So wait a minute, this data doesn't jive. Okay, so you said when you were doing it and doing all that, it was a 6.8. But when you reflect on it later, several weeks later after the experience, it was a 9. And so where do we go with that? And so they came up with the data was supporting a new theory, and it was called the peak end rule. And the peak end rule is very simple. Basically, what we remember and what experiences we remember are the peaks. They were the worst moment. Either it was awful, oh my gosh, I never want to do that again. Or in the Disney case, it was like, oh my gosh, that was the ride I've been waiting for. Our kids loved it. We had an awesome time. And then what happened? On the way out the door, they got the Mickey ears, right? All else doesn't matter. You got to ride on the ride you've been talking about for a year, and you got the Mickey ears, and you've got them at home. And what we remember is the peak experience and the end experience. So how does that relate to us and our teachers and supporting our teachers and growing and building their programs? To me, it's how do we become more intentional and contagious in the prior discussion to create more peak end and fine experiences so that we create the lasting impressions that we want in our community. So for me as an administrator, when I came into my job 4 years ago, I was challenged with the number one thing was our teachers had a desire for a sense of community. Okay, and so a defining moment. My question was, okay, so how can I create a defining moment to foster intrinsic motivation and build a sense of community? Okay, and so it says a defining moment is an experience that's both memorable and meaningful. Planning out defining moments for our team helps create the peaks and the experiences we want them to have. So as I thought about this and I related it to my job as a new administrator, I shared in the last session that the district was 70 plus miles north to south in very despairing, different socioeconomic environments. And just, to go to professional development would be an hour and a half drive in traffic to go through Atlanta. And so that's really a challenge. And so from my experience in that context, I thought, okay, I need to build a sense of community. I want to have music leadership collaboration events 5 times a year. Leadership is part of their teacher evaluation. So if I can provide them an opportunity for them to do something above and beyond that's leadership related, they get up scores on their teacher evaluation. We come together. We had sponsors and different music vendors provide catering for lunch and dinner. I made sure that as we were coming through in the process, then I also tried to spend some of my money in my budget to buy teacher resources. And so I would buy the latest Habits of Success book for the orchestra team, or I would buy a James Jordan choral pedagogy book for the choir teachers. And I would make sure that I gave them and had them available, and everybody that came out got their resource or their product. And then I also would have like a GIA catalog or a Pepper catalog, and I would have tear-outs, and I would let them turn in their wish list, and we would draw 10, and I would grant those 10 wishes that we had to pull out. And so what I was trying to do is create an opportunity that the teachers wanted to come on these music leadership collaboration nights. And then we had, the purpose was to get professional development training, because that's the goal. So we would bring people in from Atlanta area that could be experts in their field and share for an hour. And then we would have 2 different teachers from our district share 15 minutes of their best practices, their sugar sticks, whatever. So 2 teachers were presenting and getting that opportunity to develop their leadership. Everybody was getting leadership credit. They got to eat. They got to come together and talk to their friends. They hopefully went home with something as a little reward, as a door prize for coming. And so when I first started that, we did 4 times a year. The 5th time of the year, we did all just our team. And so it was just our sharing. And so the cause effect of that is when we first started, as you can imagine, it was a fractured community. So we only had maybe 30-40% of our teachers coming in and wanting to fight traffic for the hour and coming in and participating. But by the 3rd year, we had almost 60% attending every time, and over 85% of our teachers, of our 200 teachers, came to at least one, or more than one, I should say. They came to more than one. So we went from a very small start to a large buy-in, given the circumstances. I was happy at 60% coming to all of it, and that 85% of our community came to one or more. And so from that perspective, I was able to create a moment that was a defining moment to achieve my goal using this idea of creating powerful moments. And so in his book, there are 4 zones that help create a defining moment. One is an elevation. It boosts your sensory pleasures. It transcends the normal everyday events. So teachers would, as part of the different presentations, they would share their different, a little video segment and demonstrating what a new achievement was or their best practice, and they'd get validation from their peers in that moment. Okay. The second one is insight. And so by coming, it was kind of, how do we rewire what we're doing here? And the teachers coming would get an opportunity to enhance and get insight about best practices. Or as a district, I would share the why behind some of the things that were upcoming in our vision, in our district initiatives. So they were coming and getting insight and understanding, a heads up of what was coming or what I was doing to advocate on their behalf from an insight standpoint. Okay. And contractually, I didn't pay them. So I had to be thrilled that 60% came all the time. I see that question. And it came to all 5 because they were coming without pay. They were coming as part of the community experience. And that's why I had to find value for them to want to give that time to develop the community. So the other part of that is that it's insight, but it's pride. Okay, so we were catching teachers at their best. We were encouraging one another. We were sharing stories within the teams that were coming, and they had pride in what they were doing and talking about. And then the final one is connection points. So we were creating a social moment for them, creating connection points. We were letting them tell stories so that as they were struggling with something, they'd go, oh, Cedric has that issue too. I'm going to go talk to Cedric afterwards. And the best thing that happened about it was that when we were finished, at the end, people were still out in the parking lot having a discussion. And we had to shoo them out 30 minutes after the event was over so that the custodians could come through and lock the building and close the parking lot up for the night. So that's just one element of how we created the defining moment to meet an objective or achieve a goal that was part of my SMART goals and my strategic plan. So the question is, what moments can we create as leaders and then apply the 6 steps contagiously? Okay. That's why I ask you the 3 questions. Are the 3 things and goals of your program? And then how can we think about what we've learned in the contagious steps and how we can create more powerful moments that what ultimately becomes the reality is that people are intrinsically motivated. If you want your kids to learn all 12 major scales, what do we do to create a moment that they aspire for that because that's what they want? What kind of moment can we create? So moving forward, like on my agenda still that I'm sharing with my new colleague, for me, the next one was going to be creating a moment that I heard from Don Roberts in an Atlanta metro area, DeKalb County Schools. He does a senior scholarship signing day, just like the athletes do. All right. That could hit lots of different components of the defining moments, and it would create social clout, would create public experiences, would get stakeholders involved. We'd have media there. All the administration folks would want to be there. And then we would have something to publicize about the thousands upon thousands of dollars earned in scholarship money for kids in the arts and have tangibility, right, of what kids are able to do when they leave Fulton County Schools because of the arts. Another one might be to have an honors holiday festival where we bring in to one of the large performing arts centers in Atlanta and bring in peer-reviewed application process and bring in elementary through middle through high, different schools, the jazz groups, the different, like Jaeger was talking about earlier, bring in your mariachi, bring in your jazz, bring the different elements, but bring in the best, the quality of what you could do to create a moment that would gain more social currency, would gain more stories to talk about. It would also give you an event to tell stories through of highlighting the different kids and different stories for the months leading up to the event. Those kinds of things. So what could you do within your vision that you could create using the 6 steps of contagious moments to help achieve your goals that would help your teams be stronger, that would have a stronger, significant impact on kids? Or how might that impact the implementation of your vision for your job? So that's the question that I leave you with for discussion. There's my email there, but we have just a few minutes for some Q&A that I haven't really looked at very well, that you might have some questions to ask and share of. So thoughts or questions about how we might be able to create, maybe some of you have some ideas to share in the chat of different things that you, in reflection of the discussion, that are some moments that you've created in your district that are worth sharing in the chat session with others. Anyone? So some thoughts to rethink about how all of that, how I approach advocacy and thinking about what's making a difference now and why do people do what they do really is what caused my thoughts on the contagious moments and how that impacted me serving in my job. It's a great comment from Michelle. In our district, we try to socialize regularly as a department. See, I think that's huge, because every teacher, virtually every teacher that you serve is a singleton teacher. Maybe you have a couple of multiple art teachers in the building, but by and large, the music folks and your dance and theater folks, they're singletons. So they don't have the opportunity to hang out with the other 15 science teachers at lunch, or have a like planning with the 8th grade pod teachers. And so the more social ability and structure we can create, that's awesome. With all the virtual meetings, Catherine says we've gotten used to, our teachers are wanting to continue them. Absolutely. This is the perfect time to capture these meetings that they're having. Now, for me, I was a little hesitant to do virtual meetings because we had the north and south and the distance and the geography to deal with. And my concern was how much we do virtually versus how much we do face-to-face. So you have to look at what your community needs are and what's the practical context of it. But absolutely, we've learned in these last couple of months that meeting together for support can happen virtually without us always coming together in one location. That's really great, Catherine. Thank you. David's talking about working in the buy-in with great challenge over 600 fine arts teachers of all disciplines and trying to create that. But yep, that's got to be you, David, and Gwinnett. You have a challenge. Commenced a new network starting with 9 schools 3 school years ago. Michael's saying there are 40 schools across the district. It's been a powerful tool for sharing approach and advocating with programs with admin. Okay, excellent. And it's so hard. Paul's commenting is right. It can't be just at work, but our teachers work really hard and they work lots of long hours. So to me, I think that's what triggered the whole power of moments and how we can use that to motivate our teachers. If they were coming, I wanted to make sure, I know it sounds a little, but I wanted to feed them. I wanted to give them reason to not have to sit in traffic a little bit longer to get food while they're coming from their school. I wanted them to get a door prize and come away with something that made them have a happy, to give them a reason to give up more time. But for me as a teacher, when I was under Gary Markham in Cobb, I learned to thrive on, I didn't have any more time to offer, but when we had our monthly meetings, I valued those monthly meetings and made time for them because I wanted that sense of community. But I also wanted to use it as time to find out why this person, how they handled it. And then I found out, oh, so-and-so who's been teaching for 30 years has the same problem. It's not just me. There are lots of benefits to coming together in those moments. Excellent. So our time is about gone here. Just reading through these different chats. I hope you will look at these to see how others are doing. It's great. Jenny says we started roundtable discussions on different topics for elementary teachers last year, and it was a huge success. Moving that up through the different age levels is great. Their district formed a PLC for a number of superintendents ago, and they've been doing this group in like-minded individuals working towards common purposes. They started with 3, and now they have around 20, including the arts and the PE teacher. Fantastic. Great stories. Great stories. Well, I hope the time has just been an opportunity to maybe rethink some things and look at some things about how people respond to marketing and data. And for me, these thoughts have come about motivating me and challenging me to rethink what I thought I was doing to advocate and how successful what I thought was versus how I needed to be advocating, and how I reached out to stakeholders and the frequency in which and the diversity in which I needed to reach out, but also how I could use those different steps to be more intentional in reaching out and advocating for our programs in a more modern way. So hopefully this has been a benefit for you, and our time is now to close, and I wish you a great summer. And if I can be of help, please feel free to reach out. It's davidwvandewalker@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody.